Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Hi, my name is LaSheila Yates, and I'm one of the producers and moderators for Ethical Perspectives on the News. I'm here today to bring a group of amazing women that are doing some amazing work. Today's topic, we're going to focus on gender-based violence against African American women. And so the reason why this topic is really important to me is I've had a long road when it comes to gender-based violence. I got kind of learning more about this area because as a young girl, as a young child, it's important for me to share this is that I was repeatedly assaulted sexually between the ages of 8 and 10. And that changed the whole, my entire life from that point on. And so the purpose of me bringing this particular segment to our community is because Black women, we need to make sure that we are supportive and hearing the diversity of others and getting the help that we need to move forward after trauma, especially, sexual-based trauma, childhood trauma, so we can, be more supportive. And so that's really why I brought this particular segment, and I hope that it changes the life of someone else. I hope that they grow in this area and feel comfortable reaching out and connecting with some African American professionals in this area that are doing some great work. And so I'm going to stop it there and move on to Lasharon to learn more about who she is and what does she do and why does this topic matters.
Right. So my name is Lasharon Taylor. I'm a licensed mental health therapist and owner of Tailored Life, Transitions Counseling here in Cedar Rapids. This topic is very important to me because I also experienced race-based discrimination and sexual assault in the military as well as in my undergraduate and master's degree programs. So making awareness in the community about how sexual assault affects our education is very important, and part of the reason why I joined the American Association for University Women as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So I'm Tiffany Flowers. I am the founding therapist at Pathway Counseling Center. I'm a licensed mental health counselor as well as an international alcohol and drug abuse counselor. I'm also EMDR trained, which is an intervention to help with trauma. So this issue of trauma and sexual trauma or domestic violence has always been a very important to me. This is what drove me to my field. Growing up in a community where domestic violence was normal, prostitution, being exposed as a child of prostitution and being elicited, and also being a survivor myself, made me want to not only get in this field, but to provide the best services possible. I'm also the owner of Future Focused Life, where I empower women how to navigate and to take their careers to the next level while having high holistic success, not just financial.
Thank you. So Lisa, what's your position? What do you do? And I want to learn as well about a lot of the great things that you're doing in not just Waterloo, but within the corridor.
Thank you. So my name is Lisa Ambrose, and I am the CEO and Executive Director of Amani Community Services. We are the only culturally specific domestic violence and sexual assault agency in the state of Iowa for African Americans. We do provide services in Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, Dubuque, trying to get to Davenport, and maybe with more funding I can get out to some of the other areas where we have a heavy population of African Americans. Domestic violence and sexual assault is part of who I am. I'm a survivor as well of both. So this work is very dear to me, and I'm just hoping that our community will reach out to us and let us help them, and to learn more about domestic violence and sexual assault that's happening in our community.
Thank you, Lisa. One of the first questions I definitely want to touch on has to deal with, African American women and, how does assault, gender-based bias materializes itself for African Americans and maybe compared to other races of women.
For me, one of the things that I've learned is that the strong Black woman is on a two-edged sword in our community. It's one thing that has helped us overcome, right? We look at women like Michelle Obama. We look at that strong Black woman, right? But yet underneath that, it's killing us for not wanting to be able to reach out for help, because we're supposed to just suck it up, put on our best shoes, and walk out. And we're even told, don't look like what you're going through.
Right.
Yes.
So we can't even, someone look to us and say, hey sis, is something going on? Because we have been taught to master the art of wearing a mask.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, there's also in the community and even in our history, we've been hypersexualized, and people have given themselves permission that in spite of our education or our accomplishments to still reduce our value based on our ability to be physically appealing or sexual in nature, and or even have that access to us with our physical space, versus even when we do say no or make reports that they don't hear us, they're still looking at our bodies and what they would like sexually to do with us, or even within violence.
Exactly, like you said, from even slavery time, we were dehumanized. So we're, they look at us like, you don't, it doesn't matter if you were harmed, you can't be harmed. Like it's not a big deal. And so that has just went on to different generations. And that's why, like Lasharon said, those are a lot of many reasons why, we don't even talk about it or even want to deal with it. Even in the faith community, I feel like what Tiffany said, sometimes we put on our masks, our beautiful faces, we're supposed to just go through it and bounce back. But we're crying and we're hurting on the inside, and it is affecting us every day, and so we're just, with mental health, we don't want to access those services as well. So it's a circle, it's a cycle.
And because of history, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go right ahead.
We internalize almost that it's our fault. And even our community on some level has said it's our fault. So when we get attacked, they say, well, what did she say?
And what
did she do? What was she wearing? Right?
Why were you there?
How was she dancing?
How was she dancing? Right? Oh, she was being extra.
Yes. And you
Right.
see
So
that.
it's like, oh, she's been extra, so she deserved to be abused. She deserved to be assaulted.
And it's a unfortunate situation because at least it's been my experience, and other women that have been through similar situations, that the conversation itself gets shut down. And so there, culturally, if those type of conversations either get shut down by you or someone else that you know and love, then it becomes a situation where, like, okay, well, if that's how they're going to react with someone else, why should I tell? And so it brings me to, the question, how does someone approach that situation with a person that they care about and not get really, shut down themselves if they bring it up? The reason I asked that question is because I held so much in until I was about 16 years old, and I told my grandmother, and then I asked her not to tell, and then with my mother I ended up telling her, and now I just look at it completely different. I used to be very angry, felt like I deserved a better shot at life and didn't need to have that to have occurred because we already lived in poverty. But now when I look back, did my family have the tools, or the people that love me, that they have the tools to protect me? And so I just want to know, do you think that Black families or even our community have the tools they need when they hear or learn that someone was assaulted?
I don't think so. I know for me, I mean, I'm 51, and I don't remember my parents talking about it. I remember other friends' parents didn't talk about it, and I think for some reason we just don't talk about it. Maybe something from their generation as well. But for me, I broke that cycle. Like, I was talking to my kids at a very young age about domestic violence, sexual assault, different things like that. And like somebody brought up, you know, in our culture, you were named being fast, or
Yes.
you know, like you said, like it is our fault, and you know, which is definitely not right. That's the other person's behavior, you know. But we get blamed because of different generational views and values that have been passed on. So I think it's sometimes some parents are very uncomfortable to talk about those issues.
Well, the other part is that a lot of our parents haven't dealt with their own mental health.
Right.
So as soon as they're not able to, you know, protect their own children, their response, it's very common for parents to respond with, that didn't happen, you know, or completely denying it. So that's often a part of it, is that when the parents have not addressed their own mental health and created a plan or had those early discussions in marriage, you know, how would we address these things with our children, that does not prepare our communities at all for addressing, you know, early childhood assault or domestic violence.
I think on some level we are prepared, but we choose to look at trauma differently. Right? So I was just having a conversation with someone. So I'm originally from Chicago. And so I was talking to some Chicagoans, and I'm like, when we say we're from Chicago, like, people think we're being arrogant or something, or tough. It's like, no, we're saying we accomplished something. We made it through. And so I remember when I came out with my story, we were just like, Tiffany, that was a badge you came out with your life. And I just remember being confused, like, I got a badge for being hurt. And then it's like, okay, we acknowledged it. It's been 6 months. It should be done now. And so I think we are able to acknowledge on some level, but not understanding that the healing process can take long periods of time.
That it's
years. And it's just different for everybody. And just because somebody doesn't come forth right away even doesn't mean that it didn't happen, that it wasn't painful or wasn't never impacting them. And so that is something that I think is a part of us having that capacity to be able to deal with the trauma.
You know, one question it makes me think of too is about, you know, like even with families, what is an effective tool to have them support, you know, if it's their child, how do you support them, you know, make sure that they're okay after the trauma has occurred, or even with someone who's been sexually assaulted as an adult, how should parents, especially Black parents and loved ones, approach that situation?
First, by believing them.
Yes.
Believing them, supporting them. And then, like these ladies said, you know, there's other resources that are out here in the community. Praying is good if that's what you believe in. But also on top of that, there's other professionals that are trained to help you with the trauma. I think we need to get past the stigma that comes with mental health because of the historical issues that we have had, and move on and, you know, get into the services that are going to help your children, because they're going to need it.
And to follow up on that, I will say that is so much important of using those resources, because as Lasharon even touched on, our parents, our grandparents are carrying trauma, and it's hard to carry your trauma and then try to carry your children's trauma. It's a mix that is not just going to have good outcomes, even if you're in my office. And so I find myself providing counseling to both the parents or the guardians and the children, because one thing about this is that it's not an event that just harmed that woman or that girl. It actually impacted that family, that community, that school, that unit. It affected all of that.
Exactly.
Even thinking about that and the family aspect, I want to get to one of the, questions here about socioeconomic status as it relates to, violence, the gender-based bias among African American women. Is there a correlation of socioeconomic status?
It is not.
That's right.
Research shows that knows how much money you make. I don't care how famous you are. There is no correlation between that and being a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. One thing in my research that I did do when I used to go out and do presentations about domestic violence was that the community had more of an impact on whether there was violence in the community against women or not. So if the community had more of a standard of this was okay, then you had more prevalence of women being attacked. But if the community itself was like, no, you don't hit women, then you saw lower levels. Now, you was taking same communities, low income, higher income. It was the community standard. So instead of saying, hey, it's the low income, no, how about now we raise the standard?
Right. Well, there's also the continuous media images that people are influenced by as well, that regardless of if you come from a middle-class family and you're a person of and you're a woman of color and you're educated and you do all the right things like go to church or wait till marriage, there's nothing that I've heard in the office or in the community that has prevented Black women from still experiencing that rape or domestic violence or workplace assaults as well. And so as long as people have that stigma and they're not talking about how to value all people and to love, really love Black women for all of our contributions and just who we are as a whole, that doesn't change. That is not what brings out change in the community. But when we do value each other and support each other, we see how inclusion works. We see how inclusivity works in the community and in the workplace.
And are there like specific indicators, for example, in a certain mile radius that there's a church or a community center when it comes to the culture that really it's kind of the culture that either it promotes violence or discourage violence. For example, say that in each community that there's a lower prevalence of violence. Are there certain types of community structures that you noticed, Tiffany, as it relates to, I think about like church, the prevalence of, liquor stores, not to say this, I'm thinking across the board. What does that community look like?
So honestly, it doesn't necessarily have to be much, right? And I think that's something about Black people in our communities is that we've excelled with little. But it was our leaders who were speaking.
Okay.
So is the pastor on the pulpit saying that because you're married, that you can't be assaulted by your husband?
Right.
Is it because you don't have to be a pastor? It's just that woman in the community, right? We all have one, and if she said, "Oh, that's not right," go get that. Tell him to come here.
Right.
So it's the people who, and they knew if you got called, nobody wants that call, right? No one wants that call from that, right?
For First Lady.
For that murder, you don't want that. So it's the people who are speaking up and who have positions of authority in that community. It doesn't have to be over an institution or over a nonprofit or another entrepreneurship. It's the people that's on the ground that are speaking about it.
So it's the community leaders that develop that culture of what's appropriate and what's, not, and that's, I never heard of it in relation to domestic violence. My assumption was, pretty much it's the parents. And so just to, it's refreshing to hear that, there's a connection to the community and the standards of the community that either encourages or discourages domestic violence. I do want to make sure I get on another question, and I want to kind of flip the script a little bit. In this conversation, it made me think about, Black men that are also, assaulted and what's, appropriate there. My family, my husband and I, we went to graduate school, and there's a professor, his name Tommy Curry, and he talks a lot about basically violence against Black men. He even wrote a book about it. And, just even reading that book in some of his publications, he talks about, Black men, how do we support Black men that have had those experiences? And so I want to get your thoughts about, how do we support Black men that are targeted because they're Black men that are assaulted?
I think we still have to support them as well. I think back a long time ago, the mainstream agencies didn't really want to work with the perpetrator because they just assumed that most perpetrators are men. But also, we do see males that come to our office. Not a lot. I think there's issues with that as well for men to talk about being assaulted. But we also need the men to help us as well, to help with domestic violence, to stop domestic violence, to stop sexual violence. So I think it's a combination of all of us getting together, like they said, the leaders, more men to step up as well, to say no is no and this is not right. So I think we can support our Black males or any males per se in this movement as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I think having some of the closed roundtable discussions oftentimes can be really helpful and impactful for males. When I worked in Kansas City in an addictions program, I saw some Black transgendered men break down in tears because they felt safe, because it wasn't just me as a facilitator, but the other people there created that boundary of safety and security, that environment of safety and security where they could be vulnerable and talk about, how it felt and what happened. Not necessarily all the details, but just how it felt and that it happened. And us, being able to acknowledge them in that way was very supportive at that time.
I think it's also important that we bring up that, not once again to excuse, but I think a lot of times, especially women who are perpetrators of violence, or they get perceived as perpetrators as violence, is actually a lot of times they are the victim.
Right.
And they defended themselves. And research even shows that women are more like, Black women are more likely to try to defend themselves than other genders. And so they get criminalized and they're serving sentences when they were the victim. And so I will still say, yes, there are men who are victims of domestic violence. However, when police are coming out or other first responders are coming out, go deeper and see, actually, was she really a victim who was trying to defend herself? Go deeper. And so I would like to also put that out there.
Is it, just even thinking about the conversation, I know we're going to wrap it up shortly, and I want to make sure I allow for time for you to share your information with the viewers. The last question I really want us to focus on are, what are recommendations that you would have for community-wide support system? I know, Lasharon, you talked about the, closed community forums, and, I just like to know what are some things that we could do to be supportive in the corridor.
Yes, actually, like the the American Association of University Women, we plan on having Title IX workshops to discuss sexual assault on campuses because it does impact. We've seen all the statistics coming out about how through the Title IX programming and the need for counseling on university campuses to address sexual and domestic violence. So we'll be having workshops, so look us up on Facebook and you'll get more information about that. And you know, I'm definitely open to collaborating.
Of course.
You know, so you know, we have each other's contact information. I'm open to hearing more.
And so we have a couple of minutes here.
So one thing is also that it is trained therapists to help you. And I think that's one thing that's different. People think that all therapists are equal. No, you're not. Go to a therapist that's actually trained in trauma, trained in sexual assault, trained with domestic violence or complex trauma, because that's where you're going to get your best impact. So research has shown that just talk therapy with trauma is not effective, but somatic interventions.
Yes.
So that's why I am trained in EMDR, internal family systems, and even some body dynamics.
Yep.
So be willing to, when you go to see a therapist, be willing to ask them, like, what is your experience of working with trauma? Not just when you're upset, but what's your experience?
And so I'm going to go to Lisa real quick and then wrap it back one more time for your contact information. Any other thoughts?
I would say partner up, like she said, collaborate with your domestic violence agency, and other partners can come in as well. Human Rights, NAACP. When you see them putting on events, we need you to come out, and we're always willing to do what the community wants you, for you to do. You know, we'll do what you want us to do.
Okay, and I'm going to circle back around to you. How can people get in touch with you? We got about 2 minutes left, so.
www.amani-cs.org.
Okay.
Just go to our website, and we're on Facebook as well.
Okay.
You can find me also online at pathwaycounselingcenter.net, and you can also find me at tiffanyflowers.com. We do have an event coming up where we will be donating money towards a domestic violence coalition.
Right. Yep. And you can find me at www.tailoredlife4me.com. I'm also on Facebook and on Psychology Today, so you can just type in Lasharon Taylor, and I'm there. And there are also 3 other counselors who are women of color in the same office where I'm at. So, and we're all trained in trauma-based interventions and racialized traumatic interventions as well.
Thank you. I definitely want to thank Ethical Perspectives on the News and KCRG TV9 for creating a platform to have this conversation. It would not have been possible to reach as many people in this type of format. And so I just want to thank them for that opportunity. And so, you know, we had a great discussion. If you have any questions or need some resources, please feel free to reach out to our panelists. Thank you and have a great day.